Are you ready for 2026 to be your best creative year yet? Let's dive in with a brand new handmade DIY junk journal for the Junk Journal January Challenge in 2026. Let's get creative by making our brand new junk journal for the Junk Journal January Challenge with me. First, I just had to gather some materials, and I did get out my other journals from the 2025 Junk Journal Challenge to get some inspiration. I will leave the link to the Junk Journal January 2026 prompts list in the description down below. You can download that for free, and the printable will include the prompts for each day of junk journaling in January, as well as a few ephemera goodies for you to start off your journaling. And I also did include one spread with each prompt for the day, with this little star button I have as a little theme going for this Junk Journal January. So I hope you want to join me on this fun creative challenge for the beginning of 2026 to start off our creative year right. Join me this January for this daily challenge. But now let's create our journal for the monthly Junk Journal Challenge. So here I'm just starting to gather a bunch of different pages and papers and make a good mixture of different things. I really like to have different materials to work with as the main pages of my junk journal. So here I'm just flipping through all my books and loose paper collections and old maps and just figure out what I want to include in this junk journal. And then I will talk a bit more about the other materials you will need for this junk journal. And I did try something new for the closure for this junk journal, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, the tutorial of the basic journal is kind of similar to my other ones, but I will again go through it step by step so everyone can follow, even if you don't know my normal process yet. So you will need some cardboard mailer or some thicker packaging paper. I like to recycle packaging from different packages I got throughout the year. I just collect those to use in one of my journaling projects. So now we also need the papers we collected. We will need some scissors, an X-Acto knife, a ruler, an eel will make your life way easier, so that's new for me. Needle and twine. Some glue. Here I like to use the craft glue or some wood glue to make the journal extra sturdy. Now we start by taking apart the cardboard mailer or the packaging you have that you will use for the cover of the journal. You could also use a cereal box. I did do that as well, or whatever kind of a little bit more sturdy material you have at hand. So here I'm just measuring double the width of an A5, so it's kind of an A4, a little bit smaller than A4 kind of journal. This is completely up to you. You can go for whichever size you want your journal to be. And I just did cut out my prompt list and use that as a kind of guide for the size of the journal, because I didn't want it to be as big as I did for Junk Journal July this year. I just wanted to make it kind of the size I had for Junk Journal January going in 2025 as well. So it's a little bit, kind of A5 big, I guess. And I decided to kind of double the page here to make it even more thicker, the material, because I did use for my Junk Journal January in 2025, I did use just the simple paper, and I felt later down the line when the journal became more heavy it was a bit less sturdy, so I wanted to double down here. I did also fold in all the edges to have them closed off, because I like those to be clean and not just a simple cut. I hope it makes sense. If you fold them in, it's kind of more closed. So here I'm just measuring out the size of the journal to then fold in the separate width as well on the top. But I did draw the line where I have to fold it with a ruler beforehand to make sure that it would be straight later on. And now then we kind of have the cover nearly ready, or just the base of the cover in a way. Now I'm just deciding on the length of this cover, and I decided to make it a bit longer in the end, so it's not just double the page width I will have for my journal in the end. It also wraps a bit around. You might have seen it in the beginning of the video in the final product, so that when my journal becomes a bit more bulky, there is a flap that holds everything together, and it also helps with the way I decided to do the closure for this journal, because I decided to do something different in a way and sew 2 strands of ribbon around the completed journal, but that's completely optional. If you even do a closure for your journal, it's completely up to you, but I really like including a closure in some sort of way with my journals. We will get to that later on, but now let's dive into the inlay and all the different pages. So now I'm just taking all the papers I collected for the journal and folding them in half, and also deciding which to stack on top of each other. Here I use this folding bone as a helping hand for the folding of the pages. It really helps, and you don't hurt your thumb so much. So that was something that was a good investment in a way for all the journals I'm making. So here I'm just going back and forth and adding a picture page here and some music sheets there, and just cleaning up the page I did rip from the magazine here a bit to make it look a bit more clean, but also just torn in a way. I hope it makes sense. I just wanted to have it a bit cleaner torn, but not straight edge cut with scissors in a way. I used a ruler to help me achieve that. Now I do use a bit of cutting. In the end, it's kind of sometimes when the snippet you want to get rid of is too small, it gets a bit tedious. So now I'm just adding the paper back, and I just like to change things up here and there and use different materials and make it a bit of a mixed thing in the journal, that not all the pages that are kind of similar are at the same point in the journal. I hope it makes sense, but that's completely also up to you. You can add whatever fits your preference for your junk journal. Are you going to join me in the Junk Journal January Challenge? Let me know in the comments down below if you are as excited as me to get super creative in 2026. Or do you have any other creative projects planned for 2026? I would love to hear from you. Leave me a comment down below. I would absolutely love to hear from you and all your different creative plans. If you have any recommendations, what kind of creative project you will like me to tackle for the upcoming new year, also let me know in the comments down below. I would love to take those into consideration. I have a bunch of fun things planned for all of us in 2026, but there's also some room to include your wishes. Now that we have our paper stack ready for the inside of the journal, I just marked out where I would punch my holes for the binding process, and now my new favorite tool comes in, the eel, to punch some holes in the spine so that you don't have to push it through with the needle like I did before that. So I would highly recommend, if you do some journaling projects or bookbinding things, get yourself an eel. It makes your life so much easier. Thanks so much for everyone's recommendation of getting one of those. That was really handy. Now I just took out the needle and twine and get to sewing the pages together. And I also did kind of left 2 holes of the ones I punched in the spine. Now I left them empty because I will later go back and also sew the cover through the whole stack of paper as well. I didn't do that in my July version of the journal, otherwise this sewing process is the same for my July, but I realized it's a bit more sturdy if the thicker cover is really also combined with the sewing. It makes the spine more sturdy, as well as when the journal later on gets very heavy and thick, it really helps with the kind of staying all together when there's also some twine holding it together, not only the glue. My junk journal July journal is doing fine so far, but I feel like it would have been a bit better, so I decided to add those. You will see me do that in a later step. Now I'm just measuring out the right size for the pages and do cut them to size on the sides. I really like to do that step after sewing the pages together, because always the sewing process makes the pages move even so slightly. So if you kind of cut them perfect beforehand, you might not get a super clean edge in the end. So I like to do the cleaning up the edges after sewing the initial part of the journal. Now that we have everything cleaned up and nice, nearly ready to go and to be combined, I decided to first add the ribbon closures to the cover, because that makes it possible that I can sew down the ribbons onto the cover spread before combining the cover with the pages of the journal. I hope that makes sense. Now I'm still able to put the cover under the sewing machine in a way. So now let's go to the sewing room and get some ribbon and see which kind of lace we want to use for the closure of this journal. And I did decide to just get a super clean, simple black ribbon for this project. Then make 2 closures in a way, and then you just pin that to the paper of your journal cover and sew it with a sewing machine. Or if you don't have a sewing machine that can handle paper, you could also just use a hand needle and some twine or something and do it with hand. That's also an option. I just really loved the combination of sewn fabric and paper, because you could also glue the ribbon obviously, but I don't know, I really love the texture the sewing gets the journal in a way. So here I'm just sewing those 2 ribbons onto the cover, and I did leave a bit of lace on the top as well as on the bottom of the cover. That will be the 2 parts that will later be used to close up the journal by tying the knot. And now I just decided to also add 2 different pockets by sewing some paper into the journal. I just love the texture of a sewn thread in my journals as well. And this is also something I like to do before adding the pages into the cover, because it makes getting everything cleanly under the foot of the sewing machine way harder. So I like to do that when it's still easy to separate both. And here with the playing card tuck spot, I also decided to just add a bit of lace ribbon just for funs and decorations in a way. I just love to get a bit more mixed media in my junk journals lately, so thought that would be a perfect opportunity to do so. Now let's combine my pages into the journal cover. For that I did clean up a bit of the loose thread to just glue that into the journal later on to make it extra secure. And now I just decided to use some washi tape to close off the side. Then place the journal pages into the cover and go back in with some needle and twine to sew the journal page stack into the cover in a way. That's just super easy. I did use the eel again to poke through the holes a bit to make sure they are open, and then just did so a few times back and forth to make it sturdy and secure. And then we are nearly ready to go. I also include some glue in the whole process to make it extra durable. Now I just take the craft glue and go to the last spread of the journal, get the craft glue kind of everywhere, a brush, and then glue down the last page of the paper stack onto the inside of the cover. Oh, that makes sense. And then I repeat the whole process for the front side of the journal as well. So then we have the best combination and really sturdy way to combine your junk journal cover with your junk journal insides in a way. And I like to make that super durable so that I don't have to think about the structure of my journal while junk journaling, and that I can throw whatever I want to at the pages without having to worry about my journal falling apart in a way. So that's something that is really important to me when I do construct my journals. If you don't care for that so much, you don't need to use the heavy-duty glue, or maybe you could also just sew the cover and the pages together and not also glue it, but that's completely your own preference in a way. So now just deciding which kind of page I want to add to the front here. Now I did just shut the journal and did put it under some very, very heavy journals and books overnight, and now the journal is completely dry and ready to be used. But I did wanted to add a few more details, as well as to kind of make a bit of a decoration for the front cover already. That's what we will do as our final step for today, before we are ready to start off super creative in 2026. I hope you are all having lovely holidays, and maybe if you don't celebrate, or if you celebrate and just need a little break, this creative fun was a nice relaxing time, and maybe you did take your time and create it alongside with me, or did create something else, or I just could keep you company. And if you celebrate, I wish you Merry Christmas and happy holidays. And if you don't, I hope you're just having some relaxing days. I hope you're all well wherever you are in the world, to hopefully a lot of fun creative adventures in 2026. I will post some more videos throughout the end of 2025. It's not that I say goodbye for now, it's just that this video is kind of the preparation for 2026. That's why I always talk about this being the preparation for the Junk Journal January 2026 challenge. So if you don't want to miss out on any of that creative fun, or miss out on any daily Junk Journal January challenge videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to join me on my creative journey. Until then, happy creating!